who is an airspace and flight operations engineer with Wing Corporation, and Christian Valdez, senior managing consultant with Landrum & Brown. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping issues I wanted to touch on. First, you probably just saw we are recording this meeting to make it available online. And after the presentation, we will have a Q&A session. We will first answer verbal questions from attendees who raise their hands. If you raise your hand, I'll call your name and we'll unmute you, then remute you once you've asked your question. Once there are no more verbal questions, no more hands up, we'll use any remaining time to answer additional written questions that may be in the Q&A function. And you can see on the slide here, the circled number 1 is the raise hand, and the number 2 is where you can enter a question in the Q&A function. So as I've said, we'll answer questions from Q&A to the extent that we have time. We may not have time to get to every question tonight, but SFO plans to answer any remaining questions and make those answers available on their website. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to SFO for their presentation. Thank you.
Brad, I want to thank you for having us, and I also wanted to extend our thanks to the community for attending, taking time out of the evening. And without further ado, I'll pass it off to Christian for our presentation start.
Thank you, Bert, and thank you again, everyone, for taking the time out of your busy day to discuss the Ground-Based Augmentation System, GBAS, and GBAS landing system procedures with us. My name is Christian Valdez with Landrum & Brown. I actually grew up in the Bay Area in South San Jose, and then moved to Fremont for certain years. So I'm no stranger to the air traffic that goes on in the Bay Area. This first slide is useful not only as a first slide, but also to show you where the GBAS unit will be located right next to the runways. Next slide, please. So before Paul Hanna dives into the more detailed technical aspects of GBAS, we wanted to essentially provide you with a high-level overview of some of the takeaways we want for you to take away this evening, and really starting with why we're here. We're here because SFO acknowledges that the implementation of next-gen procedures in the Bay Area has caused much stress and strain on the residents, has increased noise, and has increased the number of noise complaints that the airport receives. At the same time, the SFO has been working with South-based cities and cities in the peninsula to try to identify solutions to these noise problems. Even before the next-gen implementation, SFO was looking into ways to minimize the noise footprint around the airport by establishing noise reducing techniques like runway use programs and flying over the bay as much as possible, and trying to find new technologies where appropriate. A few years ago, a piece of technology called Ground-Based Augmentation System came available, and many airports around the world began to install them for safety reasons and for other reasons. It's a great, useful tool that has proven to reduce noise in some areas under certain conditions. So SFO explored that tool, technological tool, and between the years of 2018 to 2023, the airport will have spent over $11 million on the GBAS installation to try to find ways to reduce noise. A unique partnership that's been developing between SFO and the communities. It's a unique best practice way to communicate with the communities. So one thing that we want to demonstrate is that SFO can work with communities in a successful collaboration between airports, airlines, and residents to identify any way possible to reduce noise and deliver tangible noise reductions before the traditional FAA engagement. Now, the last bullet, and we understand that some of you may be disappointed on seeing this takeaway, and that this is the first step, the initial step on a long journey to reduce noise. And the information that we're going to provide you with today, and that you'll be able to take home with you, show marginal reductions in noise in some areas. And GBAS will not take away all the noise overnight, but we strongly believe that this process, this project, and the collaboration with the communities will eventually result in noise reductions down the line. Next, please. So on today's agenda, we want to cover the project goals and objectives and schedule, and how that relates to the benefits that the South Bay cities and other cities will experience. We'll describe the two main parts of the GLS, the GBAS installations, which are first the overlay approaches, and then the innovative approaches. That's where the noise reduction comes. And the fifth bullet here, the fifth item, which is an agenda item and also a takeaway, is that tonight we're going to describe something called the community flight procedure packages. This is takeaway information for you to evaluate, and also we're soliciting feedback. We want feedback on these packages, on how to improve them, so you have the most available information to make educated comments, so we can find the best GBAS innovative approach procedures to implement. And lastly, we'll cover on proposed future outreach opportunities with South Bay cities. With that, I'll hand it all over to Paul.
Hey, thanks, Christian. And I'm sorry we don't have a chance to see everybody face to face, but it's a great privilege to be back presenting to the residents here of Palo Alto. I think the last time I had the opportunity on behalf of the project team to speak here was 2018 at the earlier outset of the GBAS project here for the airport. And I'm just privileged to be here again tonight to take everybody through some of the more technical aspects and hopefully provide some insights about the ground-based augmentation system here at San Francisco. So this first slide that we have up on the screen, just want to take the opportunity to make sure we all kind of understand what this technology is and what it's doing. And as Christian mentioned before, you'll see here on the graphic on the right-hand side, this is the area where the ground-based augmentation system is currently being installed. And if any of you have been out on the airport, you'd actually see trenches being dug and antenna pedestals being erected. A little bit tricky to see amidst the active 10 left to a right reconstruction that's also going on, but rest assured the GBAS construction is underway. And what a ground-based augmentation system is it's really just a handful of antennas and a broadcast tower and a shelter. That's it. It's nothing much more elaborate than that. And how it works is the four antennas that make up, the four receiving antennas that make up a GBAS, as we install them, we know and we learn about the absolute precise position of those four antennas on the airport, and then on their, about their location on Earth. And then those four antennas receive information from the existing global positioning system, or the GPS constellation, like what you use on your phone to navigate through the city, except that because these antennas hold still, and their job is to do nothing but listen and provide that information about where it knows it is back to the processing unit, it's able to make very small corrections that can then be broadcast back out to any aircraft that's flying in the vicinity of San Francisco to augment, that's the ground-based augmentation system, to augment their existing navigational capabilities when they're using GPS. And that augmentation is so capable, that it improves the accuracy of the aircraft's navigation capabilities down to a few centimeters, and it improves the reliability of their knowledge to something like 10 to the 9th power. So the idea being that an aircraft that is equipped to receive this GBAS augmentation signal and has the ability to couple it to the flight deck and their autopilot can navigate with extreme precision, and it can also get some interesting alternatives on means to approach the runway. The system that we're installing here at San Francisco is the Honeywell SLS 4000 system. It's currently the only ground-based augmentation system approved for installation here in the United States. One of the nice things about that system is it enables 48 unique GBAS landing system approaches, GLS. You'll hear this term repeatedly tonight, to be stored in the system, and then the information broadcast back out. So that could be 47 approaches to one runway and one approach to another runway, or it could be 5 to one runway, 5 to another, et cetera, et cetera. The key thing, though, to understand, at least for tonight's conversation, is that at the moment in the United States, ground-based augmentation systems are still kind of it's a relatively new technology here. It's certainly a more experienced technology internationally. And as a result, we're only allowed to use that extraordinary positional enhancement and augmentation in an area that's about 5 to 10 miles off the end of the runway and aligned with the runway. And we'll have some graphics to help kind of reinforce that idea here in just a moment. So as we mentioned, the GBAS is the only FAA-approved nav aid, but there's another subtlety to it, which is that this is what's called a non-federal nav aid, which means that the airport has to make the investment and purchase it and is responsible for owning and operating this nav aid under FAA standards. And so it's important for when an airport makes an investment in nav aid that we clearly identify the goals that we'd like to achieve with a fairly extensive investment in a navigation technology like this. And I'm happy to report that since we were here in 2018, our project goals have remained the same. And number one priority for this investment and for this ground-based augmentation system is to reduce noise impact to the community, in particular to South Bay cities. And there's a lot of ways that this can be done using a ground-based augmentation system, but primarily we're looking for opportunities to take advantage of the navigational precision, the opportunity for looking at potentially steeper paths that the aircraft can take into the runway, and then following those steeper paths back up towards the beginnings of the approaches, using things like GLS and RNP to GLS. There are other goals here that are important to the airport with this investment, one of them being to create a redundant capability to our existing instrument landing systems, or ILS. And the ILSs at the airport have been kind of the solid safety tool here at the airport to ensure that aircraft have a reliable path during kind of the worst possible weather conditions. So when the bay fog kind of rolls in and it's very difficult to see the runway, the ILSs that have been installed here at San Francisco has safely and successfully helped pilots and aircraft make their ways to the runways for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of approaches. ILSs have been around for a long time. GBASs have the same navigational precision capability. So they can be used under good weather conditions, they can be used under low cloud ceilings, and in the future, they can be used to help aircraft get all the way down to the runway at the point where the pilot sees it at the last second. Those are things like Category 2 and Category 3 approach procedures. That's in the future for the GBAS, but today it's only approved for Category 1 operations. So we have to kind of limit our creativity just a little bit. There are two other goals here for the GBAS installation, which is to look for opportunities to enhance the efficiency of approaches, thinking about emissions in particular and saving fuel burn. And there's also the project goal here of ensuring that any navigational technology we install here at the San Francisco International Airport has the ability to make sure that flights maintain their existing schedules and maintain the existing arrival rates that are out there. So as an example, if we come up with a very elaborate approach, but it crosses the stream of several other airports, that's going to have to stop a whole bunch of other airplanes from coming in while that aircraft follows this very kind of interesting twisting path. What's nice about the GBAS is that the FAA is currently exploring its inclusion in use for the closely spaced parallel runway operation, which is very unique to San Francisco in the fact that the runways are only 750 feet apart. So this is all underway, and these are the goals that we want to achieve with the project. So what I'd like to do now is just take everybody through the steps of how the airport is working to get this, again, non-federal nav aid, airport-owned nav aid into existence, and then how we want to work with the community going forward to start achieving our project goals in a more significant fashion. So right now, the first 4 steps are happening in parallel. And this is because it takes a little bit of time for the airport to procure a nav aid and get it installed. It also takes a little bit of time for the FAA to follow the normal development process for GLS approach procedures. And so the first phase is that the FAA is actively working on developing what are called overlay approaches. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And these approaches are going to overlay the existing RNAV GPS procedures. So even though they're matching a procedure that already exists, these are separate approach procedures and they have to go through the formal standard FAA development timeline. That includes what you see there in number 2, which is the normal environmental process review, which is the NEPA process. So that is underway here with the FAA. And we'll have a graphic to talk about that in just a second. In parallel to that process, the airport is actively installing the NavAid and commissioning it. And part of the commissioning activity is to make sure that we have these kind of straightforward instrument approach procedures that can be used by the FAA flight inspection aircraft and also by other airlines and air traffic stakeholders to make sure that everybody gains experience with the system with something that already exists, something kind of straightforward. So that's how we get to the starting point for a GBAS operations. As we go towards the future, this is where we hear this term called innovative GLS approach concepts. And right now, and over the past few years, the the San Francisco International Airport, SFIA, you'll hear us refer to that a lot, identifies innovative GLS approach concepts. So we have a project team and we work with a number of industry and FAA stakeholders to try to figure out what works, what works from a design standpoint, what works from a safety standpoint, what works potentially from an aircraft separation standpoint. And we bring those concepts forward to all of you, members of the public, residents of the Bay Area. And that begins our more collaborative process where we as an airport team want to get your feedback on these innovative concepts before step number 7, 8, and 9 takes place. So this is a bit different than the normal process where you know, maybe for air traffic purposes a procedure is proposed, or you know, this is a little bit different even from next gen. This is a concept where the airport is working with the community to come up with ideas, do our best as an airport and community team to evaluate what we think these benefits might be, and then make the request to the FAA for them to go through their normal development process, including another environmental review. So just to be sure, you're going to hear this a few more times. On slide 7, what this looks like from a timeline perspective. So as I mentioned before, 2 things are happening in parallel. The orange box right here is the installation on the airport right now. Again, if you are on the airfield and you look at that little bump out area, you will see trenches, you will see antennas starting to emerge. Later this month, you'll see a nice red and white checkered shelter. And at the same time, the FAA is actively developing the 4 overlay approach procedures that are going to be used to commission the system and introduce our beginning of kind of gaining experience with the system. And this is the GLS overlay approach operations. But why we're really here tonight is to talk about the innovative approach options and get feedback on them. And so our goal is to try to gather as much of that feedback as we can this year. And again, tonight's meeting is really to talk about the format of the data that we want to try to present to make sure that you all have a chance to digest that information and give us meaningful feedback about whether things should be modified a little bit, or whether they look okay, or whether things look not okay. Once we get all that feedback from the residents and from some of the roundtables, you can see we've been working with the SFO Roundtable and their technical working group, and we're grateful to have the Santa Cruz Santa Clara Roundtable here tonight, or some of their folks. We then take kind of the best innovative approach procedures and submit those to the FAA for their development process. And that kicks off something close to almost a 2-year timeline. It could potentially be longer, just based on production availability, where the FAA will then go through its own NEPA review. And then maybe in the 2023-2024 timeline, these first innovative approach concepts might be available for use. So that's what we're kind of showing here with this graphic. On slide 8, I just want to back up. So you've probably heard me use the term overlay procedure a few times. And I want to just provide a bit of perspective on our project team's understanding of overlay procedures and what's really coming here for San Francisco with the GBAS. So the concept here is overlay procedures. It's a bit of a safety and risk management concept for the FAA. And the idea is that if you've been navigating through the air using one method, using things that have been installed on the ground that kind of broadcast out information to aircraft that can receive them. And then you're going to change to something wildly different, like in the 1990s when GPS became available to commercial aviation. The best approach to manage that risk of when you make that transition is to design procedures that are right on top of the other ones that already exist. The idea is that air traffic stakeholders know where those airplanes should be. Pilots have had operational experience attempting to fly, one navigational method, and now they're going to have another one on top of it. And you see examples of this kind of still out there from history. There's a graphic here on the right-hand side that shows some of the early examples of an overlay where you have two totally different navigation methods for an approach right on the same chart. They're identical. So this is used to kind of gain experience as the FAA makes a switch from one navigation technology to the other. This is exactly what was done when the wide area augmentation system came into existence. So WAAS, which is additional satellites kind of floating around, but specifically designated for kind of the North American area. It's another augmentation capability. And this introduced LPV, or localizer performance with vertical guidance approaches. That is an important technology, but it also had to go through the same kind of process where they overlaid it. And in fact, they built it right into existing RNAV GPS procedures. Starting there, get the experience, show that it works, and then start to innovate kind of beyond there. And the GBAS is following the exact same protocol. So here on slide 9, just as a kind of a reminder, so we talk about GBAS almost like it's new. It's not exactly new. It's been around for a while. It's got a great track record here in the United States, but only in 2 airports. One of them is the Newark Airport, operated by the Port Authority in New York, New Jersey. The other one is the Houston George Bush Intercontinental Airport. There are private GBASs in the US, which have also done very well, but they're private. They're just used for aircraft certification purposes primarily. Internationally, there are quite a number of GBASs. And in fact, many of the international airlines that fly into San Francisco are GBAS capable for exactly that reason. Australia, Japan, Germany, just to name a few examples. But here in the United States, in the Western service area, this is the first GBAS. And very importantly, here in the Northern California TRACON that controls all of the air traffic, arriving into San Francisco, Oakland, San Jose, this is the first GBAS again. So we need to gain that operational experience first and foremost. And to do that, the FAA is developing overlay procedures that are identical to existing procedures. And when we say identical, we mean waypoints, altitudes, speeds, approach angles, segments, even the vectoring points. So where air traffic could vector to start the procedure. What that means is these procedures are familiar. It will give everybody a chance to gain some experience, but it also means that they're not that very exciting relative to our project goals. They give us a little bit of redundancy, but they also mean that we as a project team don't expect them to be used with great frequency because there are so many other approach options starting on the 2nd of December this year and moving forward. So the idea here is, you see here on the box, we're only anticipating when the only procedures that exist are overlays that maybe 2 flights a day, maybe as many as 15 flights a day are using the GBAS to achieve it. This is kind of the gain experience period, not the achieve our goals period. One of the other limitations we have here is that we understand that airlines, who are predominantly the main stakeholders that have GBAS capabilities, they will need to request a GLS approach. They will not be issued a GLS approach automatically by air traffic. And what that means is, so the default when an airplane comes into the Bay Area, they're going to keep getting the same approach procedures they've gotten today, unless the flight crew says, you know what, today I need to try out that GLS procedure. And then they have to specifically ask for it. That is how things are going to happen in the beginning. And that's a big part of why these numbers are a little bit on the low end. Slide number 10, just showing some examples. These are the procedures that are being used for, again, identical overlay purposes to be converted into GLS. And when we talk about the limitation on where the GBAS is actually making the flight path any different, it's the red boxes that you see. So here we are in Palo Alto tonight. We're down here kind of in the area of this waypoint here called Side-By and Eddy. So the approaches to 28 left and 28 right. The area where the GBAS is actually introducing a different navigational capability is a little distance away, in fact, from the residents kind of in this specific area. So aircraft flying these overlay GLS procedures starting in December of this year or in January, they're going to be navigating exactly the same way, for better or for worse. until they get to the portion of the approach that's GBAS augmented. One of the ways to track the status of these GLS overlays and in the future our innovative procedures is shown here on slide 11. So again, these procedures are slated for production on the 2nd of December, 2021. That's just one of the next publication dates that's available. And this is a screenshot from the FAA's Instrument Flight Procedure Gateway. That's a publicly available website. And if you search to SFO there are several tabs that you can see. So right now, all of these are under what's called the production plan tab, where we can see the date. When they are closer to being finished, in other words, the environmental review is complete, all of the necessary supporting aeronautical data is available, then you'll start to see an overlay version of the GLS appear here in this coordination tab. Those procedures are not there today. We just want to let you know, but we are tracking it kind of the same as all other residents. You'll also notice some changes that are coming up for the approaches to 19 left and 19 right. The changes are actually to the missed approach procedure. It's part of a safety augmentation. And if there's questions later on that, I'd be happy to dive into that for folks. On page 12, probably much more interesting are the innovative approach procedures. And as we mentioned before, back in 2018, I think we came here and we described potentially as many as 26 innovative approach procedure concepts that had been developed by a subcommittee that's been supporting the SFO GBAS project team. One of the things we discovered is there were a lot of interesting ideas, even amongst direct project stakeholders. And we did receive ideas from the community at that time, which we've brought back and evaluated. And when you have that many concepts, some of which could have very interesting and potentially very positive effects on the noise situation in the area, you also discover that it's very difficult to implement them. Implementation challenges include the fact that there might not even be FAA instrument procedure design criteria. We also learned about challenges related to technology that still needs to be put in place for our friends at the TRACON and the tower. There's also aircraft equipage technology challenges that still need to come into existence. And all of these things kind of created what we refer to as two groups of innovative approach procedures. And what we really want to focus on are the early wins to try to show that this collaborative process works. And so we call that the group 1 set. And the group 1 innovative approach procedures boil down to basically 7 concepts that you see here: 4 procedures to 2-8 right, 1 procedure to 2-8 left, and then 1 each to 10 right and 10 left. And the reason why that group has been identified is because those procedures have the highest likelihood of being designed and going into use in the next 5 years. The other procedures that have been identified also have the likelihood of coming into existence, but it might take much longer. It could take something like 5 to 10 years. And one other thing I mentioned is that when you work with so many stakeholders in these collaborative processes, you learn about a lot of restrictions. And one of the big restrictions that we need to make sure that everybody's aware of is shown on the graphics on the right-hand side. This has to do with the fact that when an airport procures a GBAS, because it's a non-federal nav aid, there is a small window of opportunity to look at achieving that airport's project goals with the GBAS. So there's the commissioning step where we need to get our overlays, and then if the opportunity presents itself, then there's an opportunity to look for more innovative approach concepts. But those innovative approach concepts they can't necessarily change the overall airspace. There's a totally separate FAA process designated for that level of change. So for instance, when you all experience changes to arrivals or departure procedures, that's a very formal process that goes through. When we're implementing a GBAS, we have a much more limited window of opportunity here in the short term. And so one of the constraints is we can't move the starting point of an approach procedure. For many of you, that's EDI. We can't change its location. We can't change its altitude. We can't propose that as part of something that we want in the short term. So what we are looking to explore with our initial innovative approaches is what can be done, assuming the start point has to be fixed, but there may be some windows of opportunity as we approach the runways. Maybe a little bit steeper, but not too steep, because if we start to make things too steep, we might introduce noise. We might introduce the need for the aircraft to deploy speed brakes, which may be some of the noise that residents, especially in Palo Alto, are experiencing today. So you're hearing me talk a lot about noise now and environmental effects, and I just want to try to be a little bit clear about what it is we're sharing and who's handling, our collaborative approach with the community versus the actual FA procedure development. So when the FA develops a procedure, be it the overlay ones that are there right now, or the innovative ones that we're proposing, it is the FA's role and responsibility to go through the formal environmental review process, and that's what's happening with the overlays. And what we're sharing today, and here for the rest of this year in particular, through these community flight procedure packages, are noise calculations that are being made using the Aviation Environmental Design Tool version 3D with BOTA 4, which is a lot of alphabet soup, but it's to say it's the latest and greatest technology that's available, not just to ourselves, but to all aviation stakeholders internationally. And what we're looking at are single event sound exposure level analysis, because we believe that those running that kind of analysis has the highest sensitivity to show on a one aircraft, one flight at a time basis, what the change in the noise might be based on our innovative concept by comparing it to another procedure that already exists. So we're trying to put that information into these CFPPs, the community flight procedure packages, and make them available to you. This does not replace the normal FAA environmental review process. This is just our means as an airport to try to work with you and present this information. So I'm going to take this opportunity here in just a moment to actually go to our website to show you all of you where to find these CFPPs and what's included in them. But most importantly, you'll hear me say this once or twice. These are draft CFPPs, what's on there right now. That's why there's only 2 of them, and they're only for 2.8 right. Doesn't mean we only have 2 concepts. It just means we only have 2 packages to share. Because as Christian pointed out, we want your feedback on how to make these better and how to make these more effective for you to provide feedback to us about what you think about these innovative procedures before the airport ultimately makes a request for development. Also, these CFPPs are static. They're PDFs. They don't change, they don't zoom very well. And so the airport has taken an additional step to implement kind of zoomable information for the noise presentation itself. And we'll show this on the website in just a moment. But to give an idea, if you're looking at the CFPP, you might see noise information like this, where the green is an area of potential noise reduction and the purple is an area of potential noise increase. Again, our goal is transparency because we want your feedback. And this tool here on the website allows you to actually zoom in to get a little bit closer down to the street level, so that you as an individual or as a community or a neighborhood can kind of compare what those effects are. So with that, I'm going to jump over to the website. And hopefully what you're seeing on your screen right now is the noise.flysfo.com website. So this is what happens if you go there just from the highest level. And I'm going to click on the GBAS tab. And what you'll see here, so these tabs have existed for a while. This is all part of the airport's noise abatement program. And what you'll see here is we have additional information about the GBAS. So we have a tab here that presents more information about what the GBAS is. Excuse me, my VAST has decided that now is a good time to share information. And this also shows us, some of the limitations that we're up against and how to get involved. And most importantly, something that we'd like to call out down here on the bottom of the screen is that there is a specific email address that's been created by the GBAS project team. And we would like to encourage, anyone to provide feedback through that email address or questions and answers. However, the most effective way to potentially provide feedback, in particular about changes to format or something like that, is actually through the established roundtables. So either the Santa Clara Santa Cruz roundtable or the SFO roundtable just increases, the chances that we as a project team will get it and we'll have a chance to make meaningful conclusions with it. So this is kind of the first landing page. Most importantly here is we can take a look at the innovative approach procedures. And there are 2 here. Again, these are just the first drafts. And what we've done is we're breaking each approach procedure into its starting point. So, when we're talking about an innovative approach concept to 2.8 right, there's at least 2 places that procedure can start. One of them is Archie, which is kind of on the south side of the bay. And one of them is Eddie, which is very close, I think, to many of you here participating in the meeting tonight. So I'm just going to take a look at the Eddie packet, and I downloaded it already. So I'm just going to pull it up on my screen. And I'd like to run through what you're seeing in these community flight procedure packages. So here on the first page of the PDF, we have information about what we as a project team are referring to the procedure as. So for instance, this one, we're calling it the GLS Alpha, runway 28 right. That's our term. That's not an FAA term. If this were to be developed, it would get a formal FAA name associated with it. The revision right now is draft. So if we make changes to these CFPPs, we will note it here and we will update the date. We're providing a three-dimensional image of what the procedure looks like, and we're trying to identify, these waypoint names, which are the locations that the aircraft have to try to be over as they head towards the runway. And the differences in altitudes are already being shown. Those altitude differences are related to the closest possible procedure. I'm just going to jump ahead one page. So on the second page, you can see a side-by-side comparison of the existing approach procedure that we're comparing it against, and what's called a flight inspection graphic of the proposed procedure. For those of you who are pilots or deeply involved in aviation, these might actually hold quite a bit of insight and detail. But this is kind of how we're making our comparison here. Again, our goal is transparency. We want everybody to be able to recreate as much as they can from our information. Back on the first page, we have just a quick checkbox of our project goals, and we have a textual description of what it is they're looking at. So as we move forward here on page 2, we have 2 additional boxes of information. One of them is showing our project team's estimation of how many aircraft will be capable of using the procedure that they're looking at in the handout. This is a very sophisticated procedure. The numbers might go down a little bit. If it's well within the standards of what aircraft and flight crews in the FAA are capable of doing, especially air traffic, then the percentages go up. One key thing you'll see here in the future and today, regional jet aircraft like CRJs or ERJs as an example are not currently GBAS capable. They can have it installed, but so far North American operators have not made that decision, and we don't necessarily expect that to change in the future. So really the groups of aircraft that we're targeting for innovative GLS procedures are narrow body aircraft and wide body aircraft. Hopefully in the future that might change, perhaps with a successful implementation like the one here at SFO. We also want to show the opportunity for these procedures to be used under different weather conditions. So we have visual flight rules, which is like it's a beautiful day, mostly VFR, which is where the clouds start to kind of roll in, IFR, which is instrument flight rules, which is where it's rainy and the ceilings are kind of low, and then low IFR is it is fogged in. And so we want to just kind of give that perspective. Some of the procedures that are being conceived of are not anticipated to be used under all weather conditions, and we'll make sure to indicate that where it's pertinent. The next couple of pages are very important, I think, for folks to review. And what we're doing is we're going aircraft by aircraft to present, again, single event sound exposure level noise analysis. And Christian, in just a moment, is going to have an opportunity to explain what that means in a little more detail. So this is a fixed graphic here. You can see the different waypoints of the procedure and where they're arriving. Again, green is an area of potential noise improvement where the noise may decrease, and purple is an area where the noise may potentially increase, and a place where we need to either explore more or get more feedback. So we have information here relative to our sample points in this area. So if we're looking at eddy specifically or side-by specifically, this is what the change in noise would look like relative to the decibel scale. And this is just a different way of looking at the information to show the number of people who are inside each of these contours. On the next page, we show the information that was used to make that particular single event, one flight, one aircraft calculation. Orange is the existing approach that was modeled, and blue is what's being proposed to the future. So the top one here is altitude. So you can see we're trying to keep the aircraft higher so that they don't have to descend and decelerate. The next one is speed. Now we're taking ground speed. So the aircraft would actually be targeting airspeed. But you can see here at eddy, as you experienced today, aircraft start out potentially going very quickly, and they need to decelerate as they approach the runway. And so there's not a lot of options for them to do that. And that may be a part of the noise experience that you have today. And so that's one of those areas we'd like to try and improve. Net thrust here, which is an important metric about how sound is being calculated, and we'll go into that maybe later. And then the configuration. One key thing I do need to point out is we are not permitted to identify which specific aircraft was used. That is a restriction that's imposed on us as an airport using the BATA 4 data set. So I can only call things narrow body 1, an example here, wide body 1. But there's a lot of information, obviously across many pages, and our goal here is to help you evaluate it. And I want to turn things over to Christian here, and I'm going to zoom in a bit to maybe walk through what you're seeing here on page 7 of this particular handout.
Thanks, Paul. So far, Paul has shown you a bunch of different pages with different types of information. So we wanted to summarize all that information, hopefully in one snapshot table. And that's our attempt here. Again, it's in draft format, it's not set in stone, and that's why we're soliciting public comment. But I'll quickly describe what we're showing you on this table. On the left-hand side, we prepared evaluation criteria in terms of noise, in terms of population being impacted by that noise, in terms of altitude at certain points. In this case, we selected Eddy and Side-by, and also the number of arrivals that take place during day, evening, and nighttime hours. And we put the innovative approach procedure and the existing approach procedure side by side, and the numbers associated with those evaluation criteria right next to each other. And then a column on the right which shows you the differences. So for example, that first row shows that the innovative approach procedure will have 364 people less impacted or not part of the 60 SEL contour. We selected the 60 SEL contour because in terms of aircraft flyovers, the Lmax, or the maximum that you will experience, is about 50 decibels, which is ambient noise for a busy urban area. And normally SELs are 10 dB higher than the Lmaxes. If you could go back to the previous slide. We also selected the 65 SEL contour because it's associated with the 65 Lmax, which is about the level of normal speaking voice. So around the 75 SEL contour is where an aircraft will likely impact speech. So we wanted to put those two SEL contours out there. Then we also wanted to put the altitudes at certain points, and we could add more points. Right now, we just selected those two fixes, the navigational fixes, but we can provide about a dozen or so different points of interest around the Bay Area. Recently, we shared all these packages with certain members of the public, and we already received feedback that speed is another component that they'll like to see. So we'll put speed at initially at those waypoints so you could compare the velocity on the innovative approach procedure and the existing procedure. Relative to the number of aircraft on arrival per day, at this time, we don't know what time of day these aircraft using the innovative approach procedures will be, but we were estimating that in the next 2 years, about 15 will use the innovative approach procedures per day. And the next page is essentially a reference page on what noise is in the sound level comparisons, and it shows you what the noise levels are for a loud jet engine at 100 feet, or jet aircraft at 3 miles away, or a downtown city noise. And one thing to point out is that that statement in the middle, the relative to sound level changes, increase or decrease. A 5 dB change is readily perceptible by the normal human ear, and that a 3 dB change, increase or decrease, is barely perceptible by the average human healthy ear. Back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Christian. I appreciate that. So the one other thing that we wanted to point out, just to show folks how to get there, when I was on, so I've returned to the Noise Portal website. Again, that was the PDF that was downloaded from the website. And what I did was, I'll do this one more time. So if we're on the GBAS Innovative Approach Procedures section, and you see this picture here that looks like the graphic from the PDF. If you click on this graphic right here, I'll do it one more time, just so everybody can kind of see what happens. You'll be taken to this specific page, and it's actually an animation that will advance through the different aircraft. And for each of the options, it will show the options from Archie and then the options from Eddy. So as we add more innovative approach procedure concepts, these will also kind of they'll be added to the website and made available for folks to explore in more detail. And the key here, and I'm sorry I used Archie as an example, but I'll just, in this interest of time, I'll zoom in. You know, we're at Palo Alto, so I'm gonna take a Palo Alto example. So let's zoom in here to the EDI procedure that we were looking at, and it works just like kind of any other map browser. I'm using my mouse wheel to navigate, and I'm going to zoom in on the Palo Alto and kind of East Palo Alto area, respecting there are many other folks from potentially South Bay cities here as well. But just to show you, this is about as far down as the current map zoom is enabled. So we can see, you know, these areas where the 70 dB contour, as I hover over it, is potentially improving. And improving means it's shifting from the outside boundary to the inside boundary, or at least that's what we believe the difference could be. That's being calculated right now from AEDT. So I know we're covering quite a bit of information, but I want to just close with our kind of structured information, and before we switch to Q&A, just let folks know about one other opportunity. So we've had a number of chances over the past few years, and even this year, to work directly with the SFO Roundtable, and in particular the SFO Roundtable Technical Working Group. I know I can speak personally. I've always enjoyed working with the city of Palo Alto back in 2018 and again here tonight. And so we want to make sure that to achieve our collaborative process of finding some innovative approach procedures that take us closer to our goals, that we enable that community feedback loop here for the South Bay cities as well. And there's two ways we think we can do this. One of them is to either work for the remainder of the year with the Santa Cruz Roundtable Technical Working Group, the same way we're working with the SFO Technical Working Group. Or if there's challenges that might prevent that, we do believe that we've got the resources to support 2 additional meetings in addition to the one today, in this identical format, working with the city of Palo Alto to give this presentation and host Q&A. So with that, I think we'd like to turn things over to questions from folks or comments.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Christian, for that presentation. I think we're going to go into the question and answer section of the meeting. So as I had mentioned, please raise your hand. I see that hands are being raised. And actually what we'll go ahead and do is try to promote you to panelist while you ask your question to allow you, if you'd like, to turn on your camera. So let's get started with that. And our first raised hand is David Gobudi.
David, how'd you do that?
So David, hopefully there you are.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I live in Palo Alto. I've noticed that all of the activity describing this new innovation being set up at San Francisco is San Francisco Airport specific, and that the FAA is not participating in any of the discussion having to do with noise reduction beginning in the, I guess you call it the EDI corridor. And the graphics that you show indicating there might be some noise reduction over Palo Alto, it shows nice green colors, but it's minimal or almost non-existent. Why is the FAA not participating in this?
So perhaps I can speak to that. Just checking for format. So it's an excellent question, and I apologize if I didn't elaborate in more detail about the, in particular, the Flight Procedures Subcommittee that is supporting the SFO GBAS project up to this point. So the subcommittee does involve a very diverse group of stakeholders. Several different lines of business within the FAA are helping us with their experience and their knowledge about, in particular, the restrictions, areas that we really don't have the opportunity to explore in great detail, either because they conflict with another airport like Oakland or San Jose, or even the Palo Alto airport. All these airspaces have to play together. But in particular, there have been some great suggestions from some of our FAA participants about things that could be explored and brought forward to the community for feedback. And I think, so I apologize if we didn't elaborate on that. There are multiple FAA stakeholders that have been working with the FAA, with the San Francisco GBAS Flight Procedures Subcommittee team. There are also airline stakeholders as well, because we need to make sure that anything that we're thinking about putting in front of you as a resident or members of the community will actually be used by the airlines. Because it's one thing to design an amazing approach, but then have all the airlines go, well, I can't fly that. So we really want to make sure that if we find something that works by criteria, that we get initial kind of very preliminary FAA feedback that could work and it could be successful. But I will point out that the FAA people and lines of business that have been helping us so far are not making any, they're not there to make any determinations about environmental effects. That's a totally separate group within the FAA, and that's not our goal. Our goal is to find these ideas first and evaluate them with you, and then put them forward to the FAA and have the FAA go through its normal process second. So I hope I was able to answer your question, at least.
No, you really didn't. So you've been involved with this, you say, since 2018, and NextGen came up a couple of years before that. And I know that people in the area of the Eddy approach have been complaining about noise for at least the past 4 or almost 5 years. We've seen no changes. And it sounds like what you're planning on doing at the SFO level is going to be minimal, if is going to create perhaps no change at all during the Eddy corridor. That's my opinion. And I'm surprised that the FAA is not participating in this, even in this roundtable. Have they been invited?
I apologize. I probably can't speak to the second part, as I'm an invited panelist myself. I'm sorry. But I think, I think we pointed out right at the beginning, this is a bit of a long road. And the first step we have to do is gain experience. And it's not just the airport, it's all the stakeholders. We need to make sure that everybody understands, how this GBAS works, that it works safely, and it doesn't have any kind of maintenance issues, or and that these overlay procedures are safe and effective. And then the first group of innovative procedures, they really are incremental. And if there are potential noise wins that can be had, that's great. But our goal is, we want to make sure that, certainly make sure that anything we introduce does no harm. That would be the worst possible outcome. So I think, I think that's the insight I can share. So I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to the second question about FAA participation tonight.
Thank you. I do want to make sure we have time to get to all our questioners. So if we can move on to Mark Scholl, please. And Mark,
Can you hear me?
there you go. Yes.
Yeah. So to the last question, I think I might just jump in there and say some things that probably you can't. One of them is that, I've been a longtime critic and spent a lot of time at SFO Roundtable meetings. But this is an SFO initiative that is being proposed independently by SFO to the FAA. This is not something they're doing. Normally they do the procedures and nobody else has a real say in it. So, this could be potentially really good for everybody, or depending how it's done, it could be bad. It's a tool, it's a new system, it's a new way of landing aircraft that gives you lots of options. And, hopefully SFO will be able to convince the FAA to do some of the better options. And that's what I think we in the community have to push. So that's my speech, but I'd also like a question for Paul. One of the things that we've wanted for a long time is what's called Bodega East, which is planes coming down from the north, go down the bay, make a right-hand turn back to the airport versus going down the peninsula. And I know one of the problems historically to get a charted approach is that, the FAA has not wanted to do it due to conflicts with Oakland, et cetera, et cetera. Where do you stand in terms of the FAA agreeing to some kind of a deconflicted, specific, charted Bodega East approach?
That's a great question, Mark. And if I can, I'll share my screen one more time. And the presentation materials we have will be made available here, I believe, at a minimum on the SFO website as part of our presentation list. I didn't highlight that, but so we talked about the concept that there are, we've shared one of 7 of the innovative approach concepts that we'd like to review with the community. Later this month, we're going to be coming out with 9 more community flight procedure packages. And Mark, an outstanding question. One of the innovative approach procedures that will be shared is what our project team refers to as the down the bay approach. So we've given it a name, GLS DB runway 28 right, but that's just to kind of give it a separate identifier. And so this is not the full contents of what will come out in a CFPP or a community flight procedure package, but this procedure, this is its 3D depiction on the left. So the approach starts at a new waypoint called D-Bay, which at this time, in hopes that perhaps this might be a successful procedure we could all work towards here in the Bay Area. There's a waypoint here called D-Bay that has been reserved. And if this procedure, looks attractive to the residents of the Bay Area in terms of its benefits and our project goals, it would introduce a what's called an RNP to GLS approach that starts here at D-Bay at 11,000 feet over the city of San Francisco, so quite high, and already at a speed below 210 knots. And the idea is the aircraft would then, because they've already slowed down, they've got a pretty good descent to make to get from 11,000 down closer to the airport into the kind of the low altitude structure. The flights are kept away from the Oakland International Airport and yet still kept primarily over the water. And away from the residents here on the South Bay cities, at least on this side of the bay. And even as the aircraft come around, there are still some altitude gains to be made closer to the runway. So another 300 feet higher when they cross Seapin and another 200 feet higher when they cross Axmal. So Mark, I appreciate you asking. This is one of the innovative concepts that we'll be releasing here later in June. And we're happy to come back and talk to the city or SESC residents about it in more detail at a later meeting.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention with the city of Palo Alto hosting the meeting, there was a reference to whether FAA representatives were invited. We invited neighboring communities and email lists of interested parties in airplane noise, but didn't specifically invite anyone from the FAA. Let's see, next raised hand is Vicky. And Vicky, if you can hit the unmute, you'll be able to speak.
Great. Okay. So thank you, Paul and Christian. My question is this: will SFO, as our designated community representative, please task or ask the FAA to publicly share the NEPA review outcomes and data? And if you won't or can't make this request, would you please explain why not?
I appreciate the question, Vicky. I might need to pass that to another member of the team because that request that you're indicating would most likely have to come from the airport itself. And I'm a proud consultant to the airport, but would not be the one making the ask. So I just want to pass that maybe to Bert by chance, or to Nupur or Doug. Or we can take it back and maybe answer the question later. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Vicky, would you please rephrase your question?
Sure. Will SFO, as our designated community representative, please ask the FAA to publicly share the NEPA review outcomes and data? And if it's not possible, or if you can't make this request, if you would please explain why not?
Okay. We have been asked that multiple times. We will agree to take that back and see if we can make the request formal. and go from there. I can't promise at this moment because it's not in the cards at the moment. The FAA will do as they choose to do with the data.
Okay, thank you, Bert.
Okay, Rob Holbrook.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me now. Okay, great. I'd like to make a comment and then I have a question, and if you'll indulge me, I'll have a couple more. Otherwise, I can put them in chat. My comment is this. In terms of impact, people are not fungible. So I'd ask you to please show the number of people negatively impacted on your charts, as well as the number of people positively impacted. We can do the math, subtracting the one from the other. Thank you. The second, my first question is, in the as you probably know, the Next Gen Advisory Committee gives direction to the FAA to consider. In the final report of the Next Gen Integration Working Group rolling plan for 2019 to 21, a sentence was included stating, and I quote, "An SFO trial of RNP to GLS showed 46% less fuel and 86% less noise impact, according to a 2018 Boeing briefing at a University of California Irvine Noise Conference." Since the 2018 meeting that you hosted in Palo Alto, I've been trying to get information about this and I've found nothing. Do you know what that is referring to? And can you explain it, or will you commit to providing some more transparency about the data behind that claim?
So I'll do my best to maybe provide the insight that I have personally about the Boeing report that was cited relative to the 2018 analysis. So in this GBAS project, and the airport's interest in it has gone on for a while, as far back as 2016, when Boeing and the FAA and the airport and several airline participants and Honeywell, just to make sure I name as many folks as I can, engaged in a demonstration event at the airport where they set up a temporary GBAS on the airfield. And then all of those stakeholders, the airlines in particular, went out and they flew conceptual approach procedures to not only demonstrate if the GBAS could be successfully used here at the airport in terms of like signal interference and things of that nature, but also to demonstrate that the planes, could demonstrate some kind of tangible noise benefit. And as a part of that 2016 study, which was then, I think, represented in 2018 by Boeing, they showed some really impressive, I think, noise graphics. In one, I think, example that many of us might recall, there's an example where they show an approach to runway 19 right, where the aircraft kind of goes up and around the city of San Francisco and then arcs into the runway. So it's using RNP, which is required navigational performance to fly, turning legs, or what they're called radius to fixed legs, RF legs. So it makes a turn into the runway and successfully dodges a stream of Oakland traffic. That procedure and the noise analysis that was done by Boeing as a part of that demonstration event did come up with numbers similar to what was referenced in the Next Gen Advisory Committee. So my understanding is that's the report they're referring to. I believe we have a copy of that on the SFO GBAS website that we were showing tonight. So we have a tab where we show all previous presentations. So that would be information that was taken from that 2016 demonstration event. The 2018 Boeing presentation that was made, I think, was done in the context of an international GBAS working group. And we'd be happy to work offline and share those links to the best of our abilities. They're public links. We don't believe that they're private if it's the one I'm thinking of. So we'll take that action item on our side.
Rob, did you have another fairly short question we could try to fit in?
I do. Are you planning to use the capabilities of GLS to create approaches, innovative approaches that allow airplanes to descend vertically on a curved approach that would be more similar to how airplanes would descend in engine idle descent?
That is definitely one of the goals of even the first group of innovative approach procedures that we are showing. So the GLS Alpha that we showed as a draft tonight by starting to kind of increase the altitudes. Again, we don't have the ability to change EDDI itself for a GBAS implementation, but the ability to stay a little bit higher on the approach as it comes towards the runway, that is exactly one of our goals. And one of the things we didn't talk in a lot of detail about tonight, we are actually just about to get engaged. United Airlines, who believes very strongly in a lot of the project goals that we're expressing here tonight, is making their simulators and their aircraft available to the project to try to demonstrate that some of the more kind of parabolic or the more curved approaches are possible and could generate real noise enhancements, even under our first group of innovative approaches. So we are exploring those things even this year with United using these innovative concepts, and that data will be shared with the public to the best of our ability. So it is definitely one of our goals with the GBAS.
I'm really glad to hear that you're looking into that. I think that could have some good advantages. And my last question, if I may, is how much is GBAS expected to increase the maximum capacity of flights landed per hour in the long term?
So I have maybe good news and bad news depending on your perspective. The bad news is there is no anticipation that the procedures we're discussing with the community right now will change the capacity of the airport at all in terms of the maximum capacity. So, in terms of like aviation and everybody wanting to find ways to increase an airport's capacity, the current maximum capacity of the San Francisco International Airport is actually a testament to the skill and training and technology of both the FAA air traffic controllers and the pilots and the flight crews and the aircraft that come into SFO. Like the number of planes that they can get in there is just, it's almost beyond what might have been imaginable if you were just looking at SFO as an airport on paper. And it's incredible that it works so well. And again, it's just a testament to the individuals that wake up every day and put the effort in. The GBAS procedures, as you heard us describe, because not every aircraft that comes into SFO will be capable of using them, at least in the next 5 years, means that air traffic can't rely exclusively on GBAS related procedures to try to make a capacity enhancement of any kind. And if anything, the only kind of real benefit, if the good news, if you will, is that by introducing more options for category 1 like, so ILS like approaches under bad weather conditions, the GBAS enables more aircraft to come in when the weather is bad. So if something happens to the ILSs, or if we're in southeast flow where the aircraft are coming in on the 19s, in the future, it's possible that we can protect protracted delay scenarios that where the aircraft are not getting in, they're only getting in very low frequencies, and that just stretches the arrivals way into the nighttime. That may be an area where the GBAS could deliver some enhancements, but in terms of the maximum capacity, at this time, we don't anticipate any change.
Okay, Rebecca Ward, can we go to your question?
Hi there. Sorry, I don't have my video on, Paul. Sorry about that. To answer Robert's question, that report, I assume the one you're talking about, Paul, is the San Francisco RNP to GLS demonstration that was done on November 18, 2016. That, if you do a Google search for that, Robert, that report's going to come up. But I just want to clarify what I saw in their sort of 80% reduction is that they're tightening the curve on 19R so it doesn't hit Oakland, and that's the only way they were getting noise mitigation, because in fact, when they did that test, they actually, at I think nautical mile 25, which is basically northern San Mateo County, it was actually higher than they had anticipated in their model. And it was also higher than what that experience would be today without it. That was my reading of it. I don't know if that's your reading of where they got the savings.
I'm not exactly sure where the actual savings number is tabulated. I just know those are the reports that are that made their way to the net. Sorry,
yeah, because it did actually produce more noise than they were anticipating and then what people had. And it does tighten the curve. And the question I would have on that is, does that mean it lowers the altitude over San Francisco in the tightened curve on that one? And actually, I am curious about that because that is what they showed in there.
So if actually, I might just take the screen share to answer this question if it's okay. And I don't want to take a lot of time on it because I know there's other questions, but it just so happens we have a slide for this. So this is a great example of one of the group 2 innovative approaches. So we really appreciate that Boeing and the FAA and the airlines all worked together to pull off that demonstration event in 2016. It was very important. What we learned as we were working, in a rapid kind of environment to evaluate lots of different innovative ideas, again, to make sure that they're even feasible. We don't want to put innovative approach concepts in front of the public that just aren't going to see the light of day. And unfortunately, the procedures that were demonstrated relative to 19 right at this time are what we call group 2. And that means that it's going to take more than 5 years for these procedures to come into effect. And the main reason for that is as much as the procedures attempted to use that curving segment that you can see here in the bottom left, these are 2 concepts that were evaluated by the subcommittee here supporting the GBAS project. As much as it tries to stay away from the Oakland arrivals stream in that configuration, it doesn't ultimately achieve it. The planes get just a little bit too close. And to actually have aircraft using that curved approach and still landing in Oakland requires additional technology and training and staffing that are well beyond the current purview of SFO's airport-owned GBAS implementation. So we're not losing sight of them. They are in our group 2. We're just not going to be evaluating those particular options here as a short-term solution.
Okay, my real question was around Eddie, and I just want to make sure I understand this, because when you're talking about the overlay, are you specifically only talking about the surfer route? Because that is the only route right now that goes across Eddie, or is there some anticipation that the flights that come down the peninsula on Bodega or on Pirate would also be using Eddie? And when you talk about the altitude, you're talking about the RNAV approach, which you're correct is, goes to 4,000 and then to 3,000 on the chart. But if you look at the tiptoe, which is what ATC typically assigns, at side-by, the altitude is 5,000. So you're not really getting an increase there unless you're saying, okay, well, now we're just going to use RNAV and use that as the comparison.
So in terms, great questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. So in terms of the transition from arrivals to the overlay approach procedures, we would expect, because they're identical, we would expect air traffic to continue using whichever intermediate fixes. So you can see them kind of depicted here. For 28 left, one of them is He-Man. There's initial approach fix at side-by and initial approach fix at Eddie. However, they feel has the capacity and the aircraft separation and the safety to pull off in terms of vectoring aircraft to join these approaches when they're on the Bodega West. They should be able to continue doing that with the overlay GLS approaches. Just please keep in mind, ATC is not going to assign that GLS overlay approach. It has to be requested. And it's very possible that if the pilot, let's say that the Bodega West is in effect, if the pilot requests the approach and air traffic just can't support it for whatever reason, it's not going to be given. That's why the numbers are so low, potentially in the beginning. But in terms of the overlay approaches, the altitudes are the same. Now, the quiet bridge, I really appreciate this question. Another innovative approach concept that is going to come out here at the end of the month for evaluation is the conversion of the bridge visual, which is actually, it's called the FMS bridge visual. It's a procedure it's a visual flight procedure, but it has a GPS encoding. And this is the approach procedure that actually allows aircraft landing on 28 right to go a little bit further out into the bay before they turn towards the runways and then kind of meander their way back towards aligning with the extended runway center line, much closer to the airport itself. One of our innovative approach concepts is to convert this visual flight procedure into a GLS procedure to increase the repeatability of it, and because it achieves that goal of kind of pushing aircraft further out. So when we evaluate this procedure as a CFPP, we will be comparing it to the FMS bridge visual. At the moment, there was not a proposal to look at making like a GLS version of the Quiet Bridge, but I'll take your suggestion, and we can definitely see if that's a feasible option for us.
Thank you, Rebecca. Don Jackson is next.
Hi, good evening. I had two questions. Who is SFO working with for the idea generation, design, and modeling for these innovative procedures? And I think you've mentioned the phrase flight procedures subcommittee. So if that's who it is, then who is that body and who's on it?
Got it. It's a great question. Actually, the list of people who either are currently participating in it or who have participated in it, because it's been engaged for quite a while, because this project is kind of going on for a fair amount of time. It's actually quite a long list of people, and I might just need to take the action to work with the airport and the project team to compile that list, and then we'll work to share that. I think just to let everybody know, I will surely miss at least one or two lines of business if I try to answer it tonight. So I want to be accurate, and if it's okay, we'll take that one back. But to answer your question about the design, it's actually the project team. So our firm in particular engages, we use two different technologies to develop instrument flight procedures. One of them is the Global Procedure Development Platform, which is used by NGA in the military. And the other one is Targets, which, oh my gosh, I always get this acronym wrong. Terminal Area Route Generation. Oh my gosh, I forget the other two. It's the FAA's platform for instrument procedure development. So in terms of coming up with a concept, evaluating it against design criteria, coming up with flight inspection graphics, that is done exclusively by the airport project team. So it's not like the FAA is there and they're running procedures and we have to go back and forth and ask questions. That's not the case. Part of that $11 million investment is the airport project team doing the procedure design and then sharing those things back out with all the stakeholders. So I think I can answer that one specifically.
In short, Don, Paul is designing them.
It's a team, but thank you, Nupur.
You're on mute, Don, if you're speaking.
Thank you. What was the acronym again for the software for that was not Targets? Because I know Targets.
It's called GPD, Global Procedure Development. So it's made by a company called McDowell & Detweiler and Associates. It's basically the Department of Defense's primary platform for instrument procedure development.
Right. Thanks. And then my second question was, what are the FAA criteria and constraints that SFO must meet for these innovative approaches?
So I will, I'll go back to my screen if that's okay. I'm gonna share my screen again. And sorry, while I go there, Christian, did you have a follow-up or something while I navigate there? Nope. Okay. Thanks. So I'm going to go back to page 12 really quickly, and I know I went through this very quickly in our overview. I think the primary constraints, and we're trying to use the little lock symbol in these graphics here on page 12 of the presentation. These are constraints that we learned about very early on, and they're fairly important. So, like for instance, when we're looking at the top-down view of the Bay Area, just a map view. There are some lateral areas that, again, our GBAS project, because it's a little bit limited in what we can achieve with the installation of a GBAS. In the future, perhaps there are more, these constraints may have solutions. But in terms of what we can do right now and in kind of the next 5 years, these are the constraints. So, Oakland itself is underneath this giant gray area here on the other side of the bay, and this area here is the departures coming off the ones. So it would not serve us from a safety perspective or a air traffic capacity, aircraft separation standpoint, not capacity. to have departing aircraft coming way too close to arriving aircraft. So this very narrow little corridor here is the one that we're trying to take advantage of as an example for that down the bay approach, which I think Mark Schul was kind of asking about. There are other constraints. For instance, we can't move Eddie, we can't move Archie. It's also very, very limited about how far left or right of the existing transition from Eddie to side-by to the extended runway center lines that we can really explore. Because, if we move a little bit to the left, then we're stepping on, other, vectored arrivals or other airport procedures. If we move a little bit to the right, we start running the risk of running into San Jose airspace. It's a very narrow corridor in order to avoid a total kind of airspace redesign, which again is not part of a GBAS implementation here in the NAS. From a vertical perspective, we do also have some limitations. Some of them are kind of aircraft practical. As an example, when we're talking about the last phase of the GBAS, the one that's actually being augmented. So it's because the GBAS is really just producing the final approach segment for us. There's a certain level of steepness that can be used before the autopilot on board the aircraft can't be used anymore for the GBAS. And one of our goals, it's not necessarily a stated project goal, but a pervasive goal of the airport is safety. And there is an inherent safety benefit to having autopilot coupled approaches to San Francisco. And if we make the approach too steep vertically, then that autopilot can't be used anymore. And then that just, there's really no difference between a GBAS procedure or maybe like a RNAV or RNP procedure. So we have to keep our creativity to kind of in the 3.5 range for, outright, otherwise we can't have wide bodies use the procedures. That would be not great. And it's 3.2 degrees for autopilot coupling. And then as we back up, the other vertical constraints for us are our attempt to avoid inadvertent speed brake usage. And, the aircraft has to slow down and descend to try to get to this kind of final segment of the approach. So if they're coming in too steep, then we're almost setting them up to use speed brakes, and that's going to be reflected in the noise results, and that's bad for us. So that's a kind of constraint. Did that provide some insight to your question? I hope it did.
We do have seven more currently people with questions and quickly running out of time. So I would like to get as many in as we can. We may have to ask some people to enter their questions in the Q&A for being answered later. I think we can probably go a little over the 6:30, but not sure how long it'll take to get through them. So Arthur Keller.
I'd like to know what can be done about aircraft not capable of GBAS, and what can be done to make aircraft capable of the GBAS?
That is a great question. And obviously, as an airport investment in an important, safety and hopefully noise improving technology, we would love to see every aircraft capable of GBAS. Unfortunately, the main limiting factor is it requires a commercial decision for each of the airlines in particular to make that decision to either buy aircraft that come with GBAS already installed. There's also a commercial decision that each airline has to choose to train their flight crews on GLS approaches, because just because an aircraft is GBAS capable, as an example, all the MAX aircraft come delivered with that capability. All of the next gen kind of Boeing, sorry, that's maybe not the best word to use here. All of the newest Boeing aircraft, not next gen, newest Boeing aircraft are GBAS capable. The new Airbus aircraft are GBAS capable, but there's still a decision to train the flight crews to make sure that they're GBAS, that they're proficient in the GLS approaches. And one of the keys there is not only to have San Francisco pull off a successful implementation of our GBAS to show that the airlines can rely on it, but also to try to encourage other airports around the United States to make the investment themselves where it makes sense, to have their own non-federal GBASs, and potentially, maybe one day have it be an FAA-owned NAVAID. That would be an amazing outcome, because the more GBASs there are, the easier it is for airlines in particular to make that commercial decision to flip and equip and train their flight crews. So unfortunately, many of the challenges are just on the operator side, the airline side. The manufacturers are setting their airplanes up for success. Pilots the airlines have to kind of make that call.
Well, can we be told which aircraft are not capable of this so that we can boycott those aircraft? And boycott the airlines that fly them?
Well, we can certainly, so one of the things we can do at the airport is present our understanding of which aircraft and airlines are GBAS capable today and in the future on our website. What you do with that information, I'll leave that up to you, but I think we can provide that information if that's useful, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Arthur. Mary Jo, you're up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, there's a slight delay here. Okay, so the question is, so far what you have presented is not buying us much noise reduction. Your number one goal in your project is provide noise reduction. And all the numbers you have shown is at best case scenarios, 5% of SFO arrivals by 2023 will use a GBAS approach. That's all total arrivals. So I don't even know how few will be using a GBAS innovative approach for EDI. So here's my question. Can SFO model an innovative approach that will substantially reduce noise? Because the GBAS approach is going to start farther away from the airport, not the 5 to 10 nautical miles that the FAA is telling you. And it would also be curved, not straight, as the FAA is telling you to do. You know how to do curve, you do it on Bodega. So again, can you model something that starts farther away than the EDI at 6,000 feet, can be curved to avoid the residential areas all under that ground track, and also maximize the flying over the bay? You just showed there is plenty of empty space that is not locked for GBAS in your picture that you just showed and shared. So what we want is we want a truly innovative approach that will solve the surfer noise problem by taking advantage of the GBAS capability without the arbitrary FAA constraints. Of course, safety and flyability are not negotiable. But the thing is, what we're not getting from the SFO team, and I don't blame you because I know the FAA is not playing their part, but what we're not getting in the innovative approach. What you're proposing for the EDI, it's so constrained by the FAA, it's not going to get us noise reduction. At best, we may get 2 or 3 flights per day on this EDI innovative approach. Pre-COVID, that surfer approach was 160 flights per day. So getting 2 flights that will reduce a little bit of noise out of the 160 per day is not innovative enough. So that's my appeal to you. You have heard me before, so I'm appealing, and you have heard it from other people tonight. We need the innovative in innovative. That's not innovative enough. I don't blame you again. I mean, you're the messenger, you're appearing under constraints. So this is for the FAA to hear and listen. So can you model a truly innovative approach to show us how you could reduce noise if the FAA constraints are removed? Can you do that?
So and I appreciate your understanding and your contributions, Mary Jo, to this process. Not just tonight, but previously. You've had lots of tremendous feedback for us to consider, and once again here tonight. I think the technical answer is yes. The project team possesses the design tools, and we can use the noise modeling software that we described before to explore just about any option that we'd like. As you've identified, the airport's challenge is we want to make sure that when we put innovative approach options out to the broad residents of the Bay, that we're doing so with a foreknowledge that they have the likelihood of being used. But to your point, some of the group 2 procedures that we are not prepared to put out here this month for review may get closer to achieving the kinds of things that you're describing. And I think that that is part of our goal here, is that, yes, we have 5-year goals. Yes, we have, commissioning and gaining experience goals, but this is a very long play here for the airport to have this technology installed and to make sure that we can build upon our successes to find those approaches that you're describing as well. So I think the technical answer is yes, we can. Christian, did you want to jump in on that? I'm sorry if you wanted to.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And thank you for the comment. This is a new technology, and for the fleet to react to that new technology will take years. It happened with RNAV, it happened with RNP. And these are the beginning initial steps of implementing a new technology that way the airport, they're looking 10 years, 15 years down the line where more of the fleet will be able to use innovative approach procedures. And by that time, we're hoping also to work with the FAA on adjusting some of the limitations that are put on our current development of the innovative approach procedures.
Keith Bennett is our next question.
Hi, I guess you can hear me now. I'm a resident of Palo Alto, and I think I'm encouraged by what you're trying to do. I understand there are lots of constraints. I'll just give you some empirical information as to what I think have been the big changes over the last 10 years. It used to be that planes were about 5,000 feet over my house, and the noise in that case was manageable. But then with next gen, we got a lot more planes over my house. And then the other thing that I noticed is bigger planes make more noise. And finally, not all planes, some of the planes have been as low as 2,800 feet. And I don't think they're supposed to be that low. So there may be some implementation issues where people don't fly at what they're supposed to fly, or the airport or the air traffic control gives them exceptions. So those are my comments. And of course, the biggest noise reduction was COVID. That was by much bigger than anything else by orders of magnitude. And even now, since the international flights are noisier and there are fewer international flights, the noise reduction is quite large compared to what it was and what your numbers show. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Keith. I hope you're able to hear me okay. I seem to be having some connectivity issues here. Can we hear from Jennifer next?
Hi, can you hear me? There is a delay. Thank you. So the GLS overlay procedures are various procedures. They involve Oakland Airport traffic. And as you may have seen, Oakland is having a huge expansion. Palo Alto also gets San Jose Airport traffic. So I share the concerns of the first person who asked the question, where's the FAA? I don't think this project should keep going without the FAA at the table. And I'm very concerned about the fact that the FAA is just letting this happen on the side, not addressing the system issues that they created with the Metroplex. And so I would ask that should be the first objective, which is that we should all collaborate to ensure that the FAA is present. The other thing is that I don't trust the people from the lines of business, quote unquote, in the air traffic organization doing environmental analysis. And I want to just make sure everybody knows that what you term as environmental review can be a checkbox, a piece of paper where the FAA, those folks that are in your committee will do and not consider any impacts on the ground. So I'm very concerned about the term environmental review. What we need are the highest level of environmental assessment, which includes baselines, noise baselines. You have the capabilities, the FAA has the capabilities. So my question is, how much would it cost to actually do modeling of noise maps on the ground with cumulative metrics? Because as you know, we don't hear average and we don't hear one event. And what is it going to take to bring the FAA to the table? Because it looks like, and I want to thank you because it's great that we're going to have a collaborative process, but we're missing the key participant, and that's just essential. And you know, if airlines want to join, that's even better, but we should have them at the table.
I appreciate the feedback and the question. And I might pass this one to Christian as well. So I think, you know, again, at least for tonight's engagement, you know, we're here just as part of panelists ourselves as part of this first of hopefully more outreach efforts. But in terms of the CNEL, the cumulative noise exposure levels, Christian, did you want to speak to that at all by chance?
Sure. And the difference between CNEL and SEL, which is what we selected it to show in our CFPPs, is that when comparing two procedures, it's much clearer, much easier to compare a single event to another single event via the SEL or the LMAX metric. We decided to go with the SEL. I think most of you have been around the noise topic for some time and the discussions around metrics, and many communities don't like the DNL and CNEL metric because it's an average noise around within a 24-hour period. Showing DNL change or CNEL change here in this project will show, for example, if we don't know what time of day the innovative approach procedures will take place, but conservatively we could put 15 of them at nighttime since it's got the most exposure. But at the same time, we have to include all the existing procedures in that and existing noise in that 24-hour period. So you'll be adding that noise into a DNL or CNEL metric, and the difference at the 65 DNL, for example, or CNEL, it will barely move the line. It will be such a small area to evaluate that'll be difficult to evaluate which one is better.
May I just say something? You're
Sure.
comparing one procedure to another. And as the groundling, as a person on the ground, I'm comparing a noise baseline on the ground to another. And my understanding of DNL is that as bad as it is with an average, it takes in all of the operations for the year, which is what happened with the National Environmental Survey study. You put in all the events, and you know, a model is only as good as what goes in, garbage out. But if you can put all of the operations for the year and then you calculate DNL, that is a much better picture for me and what I want to know. Because I also have a safety and risk management approach. I don't want to be here if I don't know what my noise baseline is going to be, you know, in a year or two, or what the projections are with the Oakland expansion, with the San Jose expansion. So I think that's where the difference is. You're talking procedure to procedure. I think many of us want to know what's going to happen to us on the ground and what our environment is going to be like. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let's see, let's move to Council Member Lydia Koo from the Palo Alto City Council.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to kind of come on and just say thank you for coming to the presentation and actually doing this for the community. It's actually been very important. that they hear what you have to say and be engaged also. So I just want to say we, the council, greatly appreciate that you did this. And thank you for your offer for the 2 other meetings. We will take it. So thank you so much. We look forward to that. Have a good evening.
Thanks. And it's 6:40. I think this meeting was scheduled through 6:30. Why don't we take one more question from Dave E. I think his hand's been up quite a while. So if we can do that. And I'm sorry, Karen Porter and Darlene Yapley, I think we're not going to be able to get your questions. If you could please enter them in the Q&A if you hadn't already, then we can be sure to work with SFO to get those answered.
Dave, thanks for having the last one, and I'll make it fairly quick. My question is any differentiation for late night flights, such as things after 11 o'clock or at midnight? I know that there's several flights from LA and also from Korea, from Seoul, that fly over between 12 and 1, after midnight, and those are particularly bad. I was wondering, A, is there any differentiation for the late night, and B, can there be something more suggestive for those flights when traffic is less, and instead of waiting for a pilot to ask, at least make a suggestion that they use a GLS approach or try the GLS approach. It's not busy and it's much more noisy for people that are trying to sleep. Thanks for those answers.
That's a great question. I think, and I kind of heard it as maybe two questions, and I want to try to answer one. And Christian, I might pass the other one over to you. So, in terms of, so the 2 questions I heard are kind of like, we're presenting single sound exposure level noise analysis in our community flight procedure packages, and does that take into account the concept that some of the aircraft that might use these innovative approaches are coming in at nighttime versus daytime? I'm sorry if I misheard it, but the second question, it sounds like, is more about, would it be possible for the airport to try to encourage or come up with strategies on how to encourage highly beneficial innovative approach procedures that do potentially show noise improvement, even in the short term, for those late night arrivals to potentially use them when incoming traffic is low. So I can speak to the second one maybe a little bit, and I'm always delighted to work alongside Bert and the noise abatement team, because the airport does have all sorts of noise abatement strategies and recommended procedures, and obviously the FAA and air traffic stakeholders work directly with the airport and the residents to try to figure out if there are ideal approach procedures, arrivals, runway usage pairs, to focus on those. And so I think it's very possible that in the future, if one of the innovative approach concepts that looks favorable to the residents and is taken forward for FAA development and then goes into use, if it truly works the way it hopes, because again, we want to measure data too. It's not we don't want to do our math analysis and then walk away. We want to make sure that there's tangible evidence that there is a noise reduction. If that's the case, then it could be that approach procedure, that GLS innovative approach procedure, is included as a part of the strategy for, in particular, nighttime noise abatement, and especially if those aircraft are GLS capable. On the nighttime SEL analysis, Christian, I'll pass that to you very quickly.
Sure. On a single event level, there wouldn't be a difference between being at nighttime or the daytime. But on the annual contours that the airport produces, we would get a better understanding on how many innovative approach procedures are flying once they get implemented. And the modeler would put in those parameters, for example, for nighttime operations. And then at nighttime, there would be a multiplication of 10 improvement. So whatever noise reduction is at night, it would be multiplied by 10 in the overall noise contour.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that brings us to the end. Really want to thank the SFO team here for being here and the presentation and the question and answer, very informative. And thanks to all the community members for participating. As we said, SFO plans to answer there were quite a few questions in the Q&A that we weren't able to get to tonight. And I think they're planning to post that on their website. For the city of Palo Alto, we've also got our cityofpaloalto.org /airplane noise webpage. And we'll put the information from this meeting on that page as well when it becomes available. So thanks again, everyone, and good night.
Thank you to the city.